Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started.
Hey, John Spears.
Hey, Lauren Lefkowitz. How you doing?
How's it going with you? Let's start with you today.
You want to start with me today?
Yeah.
I am doing so well. And I am definitely at the effect of things going really well right now. And I'm going to totally be in it and okay with it. I just moved into a new house. It's almost set up. It feels really good and right. And for a long time, there's all of this kind of uncertainty and transition that was occupying so much of my space. And now it's not. And I just feel like really expansive and like open and kind of settled, which is a really good experience to have.
That is a really good experience to have. I can see it in your face. It's amazing.
I'm beaming. Yeah. I'm like
ear to
beaming.
Ear. Yeah.
How are you?
I am having a learning week.
Oh, learning. Womp womp.
all the things are coming up, and I'm trying not to push them down.
Yeah.
And that's learning, right? Like my automatic, we're going to talk a lot about automatics today on our topic, which this is not, but my automatic is like, fix it, push it down, put it in my backpack of crap and come back to it later. And I'm not doing that. And as a matter of fact, I called my coach and I said, how do I like not do a lot this week, but get a lot done kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And where I feel really engaged and not like stuck in my learning, which is sort of a washed way of saying it's a hard week. Where, is, really looking at like, how can I phone it in, except for the things I don't want to phone in. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm not phoning in our podcast. I'm not phoning in my client calls. I'm not phoning in my calls with my coach and my therapist and networking calls that I have. Like those I'm super present for and I'm happy about and excited about. But like the rest of it, the social media that I usually get so excited about and the back end work that I'm usually like pretty decent at and just like being engaged when my mind is really distracted. And my coach said, like, phone it in, repost old posts. Don't comment on people's stuff this week. Just keep yourself active enough that people know you're in the world, that the universe knows you're in the world and that you're participating. And then like, you'll come back to it next week. And I really appreciated that because that's not my strong suit, right? To sort of sit down on the job and just let the job happen. And so I'm doing that this week. I'm choosing it. And I'm proud of myself for that.
That's awesome. Yeah. I loved your reframing having a hard week into having a learning week. Because I think so much of what we do as humans is all about language. When we talk about ontology and how, the way we be in the world and being, language is a big part of that. Being isn't just attitude or perspective, but it's the language we use. It's how we talk about the context that we're seeing things in. And so I love that. It's really a beautiful way to shift how we're approaching quote unquote hard things and making them learning. And for me, when you said that in my own experience too, it just takes a lot of the heaviness out of something being hard. And if I have a growth mindset and I'm open to learning from something, there isn't the pressure to do things right. There isn't the pressure to be perfect. It's really kind of practicing, and it's really kind of going through whatever it is we're going through with this really open and curious kind of mindset about what's happening for us in the world.
Yeah, which is a beautiful lead into our topic.
See how I did that?
Yes, well done. Well done, you.
I just had to call it out.
Yeah, well done. So our topic today is curiosity. And when we recorded our last episode, the word curiosity came up. And when we finished recording, we said, how have we not done an episode focused on curiosity? Like, that's what sort of everything is about. And I think that a lot of our other topics will come up today, because at the core of it, when we go into autopilot, right, and we're just going along our day and living in the inertia of just how things are, we forget to be curious. And so we're going to talk about curiosity in some depth today, and see what we come up with, and see what we can offer to others, to our listeners, about what curiosity even is, how to incorporate it into your life, and all of that stuff. So I'd love to start with, like, where does it begin, right? Everything comes from our childhood, for sure, right? But also, we start out learning things externally and then we internalize them. And so when you think about curiosity in today's world, and sometimes the lack of it, or the lack of even understanding how to get curious, where do you think that origin story comes from?
Well, I think what's really interesting is my own experience of curiosity is that as kind of teens or even kind of young adults, up until kind of the rest of our lives, like I think a lot of people, there's this sort of thinking or experience of curiosity of, like, don't do it, like, stop it, quash it, don't encourage curiosity. I think, when we're kids, there's probably an age up through toddlerhood, through kind of elementary school, where you really encourage curiosity and learning. But then something happens, and there's like this really interesting shift that happens. Like, I remember when I was a kid being told curiosity killed the cat, and that, like, don't be curious about certain things. And this whole idea of dumb questions, like being afraid to ask a dumb question, kind of was introduced. I also remember asking a lot of questions as a kid, and not just in my own family, but sort of in the world, like people being really frustrated by that. Me asking why. I mean, how many times have you been out and seen a family with a kid saying, why? And yeah, it's probably really freaking annoying, but there's a curiosity there. There's like a desire to understand and to know, as opposed to just doing whatever someone says or believing what someone says and accepting it as truth. And so I kind of, in my own experiences, it was encouraged as like a younger child. It's kind of not encouraged my teen years. And for me, this idea of curiosity and really being curious only was introduced back into my life a few years ago. I've always been a learner, been kind of curious externally, but I think curious internally is a really newish thing for me.
There are two things I want to touch on that you just talked about. One is the why, when we're little, asking why, and sometimes getting the answer from a parent, a teacher, a camp counselor, whoever. When you say why, the answer was because I said so. Mm-hmm. And that's it's a time saver, right? And I get it. And I can remember being at work as an adult and having an employee ask me why, and in my head thinking, because I said so. Like, this is what we have to do, right?
Right.
And pausing so that I didn't respond in that way and didn't dismiss people. But then, sometimes having to put my foot down and saying, like, I get that you're questioning it, and also, this is where we're headed. But I think, that when you get a why, and then the response is don't ask why, you start to question when you should be asking
right.
why, right? The other thing that you touched on that I thought was really resonant with me was that we get busy and we forget. You didn't say it exactly that way, but we forget we can ask why. We forget that there's like opportunity to get curious. And just like you, I was a learner for a lot of years, but I was a learner because I needed to learn so that I could do whatever, right? So it wasn't, hey, I'm curious about how trains work. I'm going to go do some reading on trains. Instead, it was, ooh, there's a new law coming out that's going to affect all of my employees. I'm going to do all the reading on that so I can learn, not because I need to get curious, but because it's like my responsibility.
Yep.
And I've always been a reader, and I like fiction, and I like biographies and autobiographies and creative nonfiction. Like, I've been interested, but not necessarily out of curiosity, more out of someone saying, I read this great book, you got to read it.
Right.
So becoming a more curious person was really eye-opening for me. I'd love to hear from you before we dig into like the how-tos and the where to starts and all of that. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what do you see in the world that happens automatically? What's different when you're curious?
When I experience the world, when I go out in my day and I'm not curious, I'm taking everything at face value. This is just how it works, right? Like the stoplights. I mean, I'm actually very curious about, how do you like run a functioning city? Like there are all these different facets and components of it, like the stoplights, like how do you get them to work? So you like ease traffic. I mean, that's something I'm genuinely interested in because I just don't understand it. Like it seems so complex to me. But when I'm not curious and when I'm kind of like head down, just doing my thing in the business of my life, I just take everything as it is. This just works. That person was mean because they're a jerk. Whatever, right? And so I think, one of the things that I was really came up at the end of sort of what I said last time, what you were talking about, is I think there are two kinds of curiosity. There's this sort of curiosity about like things in the world, how things work, how things play out. And there's this internal curiosity about sort of what's happening inside of me. Oh, I just got triggered there. I'm like really upset about this situation. Like, why? What happened? Instead of just assuming the worst in someone, kind of really digging into it. And I have actually a really funny story about this, if I can share it, Lauren. Okay, so I just moved into this new house. I hope my neighbor isn't going to listen to this podcast because it's about her. But we just moved into this new house, and there's this really cute garden that I had assumed was on my side of the property. And so we moved in on a Monday, and on like Wednesday, my neighbor was in the garden, like picking everything out and like planting new things. And I was like, what the F? I was like super activated. I was like marching around my house. I was like, what is she doing? I emailed the realtor. She contacted the sellers. The sellers confirmed that this was on our property. And I was like filled with like righteous, not even like indignation, but like rage. Like I was just like, how dare she? And so I called my coach. I had a call with my coach because I was like, this is really a lot. Like this is not a proportional response to some woman in my garden. There's something like super deep. And I could have just like kept it there. Like this woman is doing this thing to me, and I'm like really upset about it. But I kind of was curious, like what's underneath all of that? Like there's clearly something there. And I think previously, several years ago, I never would have questioned what's underneath. I would have just taken it at face value, at this person is doing something to me. It's making me feel a certain way. And this person's wrong. I'm right. And so I kind of explored this with my coach, and turns up there was a lot under there. And there's this experience I've had in the past, feeling taken advantage of, kind of feeling naive. And so this experience just triggered all this stuff in me, and it like came out in this situation? And so, I just think for me, that's a really interesting example of being curious about something, right? Like and I get triggered all the time, Lauren. I don't know about you. I am triggered every freaking day about something. And I'm always asking myself, what is this really about?
Yep.
This is not about the kind of surface level thing that's happening. There's always so much deeper. And my partner, Chris, it was really funny. He's like, you've talked to me about this 3 times today, John. Like, what the heck is going on? And I was like, I couldn't get it. I couldn't kind of get it out of my system until I like sat down and was like, huh. And I explored the past and kind of asked myself lots of questions about what is this really about? It's not about her going in my garden. It's about this general experience I've had growing up and as a kid, going back to it all starts in childhood thing. And so for me, curiosity has really enlarged my life in that way. It's really helped me to see things clearly. And, one of the things I've seen about times when I've not been curious, or I see in other people who are not curious, this real commitment to being right or to knowing it all. And I think once I've admitted I don't know it all and there's something to learn and to practice, kind of going back to how you started the conversation, I think there's like so much richness there for us.
Yeah. Did you talk to the neighbor?
So 2 things. One, it is on our side of the property. I just want to clarify that for everyone who's listening. And 2, I had before I kind of explored all this, I had a quick conversation and I was like, hey, like, where's the property line? And she's like, oh, it kind of runs down the middle here. And I was like, even more activated that like this woman would like plan stuff when she knew it wasn't only on her space. I have not had a conversation yet. Partially because my daughter is friends with her daughter and we're like new. And so there's going to be an opportunity for me to talk to her as the seasons change and as we like kind of recalibrate what happens next season. I'm really looking for a win-win where like we can both use the garden, both get what we need and want out of it. And so yeah, that's like the next step.
Nice. Love it. I think that I got triggered while you were talking. Because I hate saying I don't know. I quash curiosity in favor of being knowledgeable. And I don't think I've ever recognized that in myself out loud until this moment. So wow. Congratulations, listeners. You've just come to a revelation with me. I love to know. There's a capability survival mechanism in me. It's the perfectionist. It's the person who doesn't want to be caught not being smart enough, right? And so I want to know. And so I build stories, right? I come to the conclusion for other people. Yeah. I don't do that in my coaching practice. I do that in the things that happen to me or feel like they're happening to me. Mm-hmm. And well, she's mad at me because, or he's being a jerk because, or they're trying to take advantage of me because, right? Or like I had already decided this was a good person and they do something that's out of character of what I consider a good person. And now I'm triggered, right? And in all of those kinds of circumstances, it is because I'm not getting curious. I'm going back to the stories I've created in my head. I'm going back to like this defensiveness mode, this mode of like, I got to know everything. And if I'm wrong and caught off guard, like I've been dumb, I've been stupid about this. And so I see for myself when I'm not curious, it's because I'm like offended or feel like if I ask questions from curiosity, I will come off looking foolish or incapable. So thanks for opening that door for me, because that was
you're welcome.
Good coaching. It's a good mini coaching session right in the middle of our podcast.
I have more questions for you, but yes, we should. I'm curious about so much that you said. Let's move on.
So we've established that curiosity is good.
Yeah.
Right. And also that we all get triggered in different ways and in some ways that we don't realize.
Yeah.
If I am a leader and I am trying to step out of my own automatic ways of being, my own coming to conclusions, my own answering the questions that someone else might be able to answer in a better or different or more expansive way, how do I trigger myself to like notice when to get curious?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Lauren. I think there's a few things, and this is one of the things I think we keep on coming back to on this podcast, and that's to slow down. I think we are moving so fast, particularly lots of our listeners who I know are senior leaders in organizations or executives. They have families and responsibilities, and they're under a lot of pressure. And from my own experience and from the experience of the people that I coach and that I know that you coach, generally speaking, time is going really fast. They're making very fast judgments. We're having to move from one thing to the next. We're having to context switch all day long from one thing to the next. And that doesn't really lend itself to slowing down. And there's this really great quote by Viktor Frankl, who wrote one of my favorite books, Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about there is a space between the stimulus and the response. And my goal for my own life and for those that I coach is to create more and more space between the stimulus and the response, because that's when we have the opportunity to choose to either do something automatically, this automatic way of being right, being really activated in our ego, our survival mechanisms or our defense mechanisms kind of come up to protect us, or to be curious about what's happening. And so I think what I would say for me is, one, slow down, and two, I don't know if this is your experience or if our community or listeners do this. I used to get really frustrated when I would get triggered. When something would activate me or trigger me, and just to define what that means is really when an event would happen or something would happen, and I would get like really kind of like fight or flight, kind of go into this kind of feeling like my back was against a wall. That's kind of what I'm referring to as being triggered. I used to be really frustrated at those moments because I would feel, oh, this is so dumb, right? On a surface. And sometimes it has been dumb, but it's sort of activated this past wound that's there. And instead of, again, taking things on its face, I would ask, okay, so what's really going on here? I think asking those kinds of curious questions, like what's really behind this? Journaling, or, I've walked out of a meeting that really triggered me because I didn't want to kind of come from my survival mechanism or from a place of feeling defensive. I had to like physically leave a meeting to kind of really get curious. And I think being grateful for when we get triggered, when things make us angry or hurt or sad, they're really an invitation to kind of explore what's deeper. So I would kind of begin taking some space when you kind of some awareness, when you notice that you're getting activated or triggered, what's happening in your body? Kind of what are my body sensations? What's kind of happening? I'm asking yourself, what is happening in my body? Where is it? Where do I feel this? Is it in my chest? Is it in my shoulders? Do I feel it in my gut? Do I feel it in my low back? I mean, those are some of the places, when I get triggered, if we're speaking specifically about that, I want to like, what's happening? Where is it happening in my body? And then where have I felt like this before? And kind of trace it back. So I think if I'm thinking about stuff, being curious in that way, like that's the trend that I go down. If I'm thinking about curiosity just sort of in the world, I like this whole kind of, how do lights work in a city? Like, I would ask myself that question. And I don't know about you. I also like am interested in something in a moment and then I forget about it. So like write it down in my phone. Like I have a list of things that I like want to learn more about. And so like I write it down, and when I have some time during the day, I'll spend some time being curious and like Googling, how do lights work and how do traffic lights work or whatever. And so, and if there are any traffic light, I don't know, what are they called? Municipal planners or whatever. Like I'd be super interested to to hear about that. But I think those are some ways, both internally, like cultivating internal curiosity and also external curiosity.
Yeah.
How about you, Lauren?
The pause is so important for me. The people pleaser who lives deep in my soul, who takes up a lot of space in my body, automatically wants to have an answer, wants to say yes, wants to do the thing, wants to help however I can. The hand is going up, like, count me in. And it never feels good, right? Because I've either said yes too fast, or I don't quite understand, or I'm going to have to figure out more than I wanted to figure out, or I should have said no, right? Like, and it's a good kind of should have. Like, I had the opportunity to say no. Nobody was pointing at me and saying, like, you, Lauren, you have to do this. And my automatic went to like, yep, I'll figure it out. No problem. Right.
Yeah.
I did it with the wall behind me, which listeners can't see, but for a long time I had my, I had photos behind me, and I got tired of them after a few years. So I bought these like felt wall tiles to put up and some shelves. And I was measuring, and I was like, they say measure twice, cut once. I measured 11 times, never cut. Right. And so it looked like I'd been kidnapped, and I was in somebody's beige basement with like holes in the wall from the photos.
It did look very like basement-y, I will say.
It looked to me like I should be holding up a newspaper with today's date showing proof of life. But I, for a while, did not get curious about why I wasn't doing it. And I just kept saying, it's my inner perfectionist. It's my perfectionist. It's my perfectionist. Well, the bottom line was I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time spending money on myself. If I go out with friends, if I go on a vacation, like, I'm all in, whatever you need, I'm treating, right? Like, I'm not like showy about anything, and I'm certainly not a zillionaire, but it's very easy for me to spend money in the company of people and for others, when it's like for me, by me, created just because I need it or want it. I get all kinds of emails like, hey, you left something in your cart, from all the online stores. Mm-hmm. And so what I recognized finally, because I got curious, right? Because initially I was like, why am I not just doing this? And it's a lot of measuring. I have like 20 tiles up on my wall, and they all had to be like evenly spaced, and the shelves had to fit in the middle and all that. So it wasn't just like put one up and put all the other ones next to it. And what I recognized was I didn't want to spend this money on myself. And then I thought, the money I've been spending in time in my head is costing me more than what I would pay a handyman to come in and do it. And so I finally hired a handyman, and it went up in like a few hours, and it was, and it was done. If I hadn't gotten curious about it, if I hadn't said something to one of my friends, and I hadn't said something to my coach, and gotten two different perspectives, right? The coach perspective of asking me questions about me, and the friend perspective of saying, like, you do this, you put stuff off for yourself because your like internal accumulator of money is like, you're going to run out of money, don't spend it. Right. And that's not true. I'm not running out of money. I can keep the house. But I imagine it to be that way. And I imagine that spending this few $100s on getting this work done that I feel like only matters to me isn't worth it. Right. So there was some like very surface level procrastination stuff, and some very like deep level core beliefs about what I shouldn't be spending money on. And deserving. Right.
Right.
And so the getting curious part, like you said, is taking a pause. For me, it's like a full step away. You said it too, like stepping out of a meeting to get curious and asking yourself why, over and over and over. There's somebody, and I can't remember if it was Simon Sinek or somebody else, but there was somebody who brought up the philosophy of asking yourself why, or asking somebody else why, 7 times. Mm-hmm. This is important. Why? It's important because blah, blah, blah. Why? right? And keeping on asking why until there's nothing left.
Right.
And with every why, you take a step deeper and a step deeper and a step deeper. You also gave a great example of what is this really about? Which if you ask that question and then you zip your mouth shut and you stay quiet, you're going to get the response, nothing, it's straightforward. I don't know. And then you'll get some depth because our brains automatically want to shut us down. They want us to know the answer, do the thing, get through it. Our bodies stop accepting that once we start getting curious, right? And you talked about different places you feel it in your body. I feel it in my throat too, all the places you said, but also in my throat. Like I'm trying to quiet myself by having a lump in my throat. And so get curious about getting curious, which sounds like very Inception-y, right? But I sometimes will reflect on my day and think about like, what did I just automatically do today? Or it'll get to the end of the day and I didn't write down a thing I wanted to do, like a meditation or stretching, like something that's good for me and my body. And I will ask myself, what had me skipping that? And there's an answer. I don't know, I got busy. And then there's an answer. Right. So I think for me, the like real steps to get started are the pause and the bringing in other people. Not just knowing the answer or deciding on the answer, but going to your coach, going to your friend, going to your trusted people and saying like, I'm so frustrated with myself because I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, or I'm so annoyed because this person did this thing to me and she did it because of this, and being called out on like, do you know that she did it because of that? Or are you finishing the story without actually knowing? And so I just see so much value in choosing some outside people who are outside of the inside of your head, right? Who are not your survival mechanisms telling you why you're doing it wrong, to help you get curious and help you figure out whatever you're trying to figure out.
Yeah. The one thing that I really got from what you just said is that a lack of curiosity really keeps us in our old patterns. That when we're not curious about what is this really about or why or what's underneath this all, we tend to repeat the same patterns, the same behaviors that don't serve us anymore. And so taking that pause, kind of doing everything we talked about doing, really gives us another opportunity to create new habits, create new patterns that actually serve us and are beneficial for us.
Yes. Beautiful. John, I could talk to you about this all day.
Already? What are you
I know.
All day, every day.
All day.
I really wish we can just talk all day, every day. That'd be really fun.
That would be really fun. It'd be like the Truman Show, but co-created. Thank you, as always, for having such interesting conversations with me and bringing humor and compassion and delight to our conversations. And we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening today. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at icouldtalktoyouallday@gmail.com with your comments, questions, and topic requests. And subscribe so you don't miss an episode.